Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Researchers around the world are racing to develop a vaccine against COVID-19, with more than 170 candidate vaccines now tracked by the World Health Organization. Among those, the promising ones are reportedly from the UK, the US, China, and some are also suggesting Russia, with large-scale human tests underway in different parts of the world. However, coronaviruses are a large family of viruses, and there were previously no vaccines for any of them. With the virus still mutating rapidly, will there be ever an effective vaccine, and how much longer do we have to wait? After it comes into being, will people trust it? A discussion with our panelists from different parts of the world. For more on that in Seoul, we are joined by Jeremy Kim, Director General of the International Vaccine Institute. Mr. Kim, what a pleasure to see you once again.
It's a pleasure to see you also.
Busy time. So, 6, according to the WHO, coming into trial 3, third stage of the vaccine. However, there are others that keep on popping up. Tell me more about your assessment. What is the real picture?
So it's very important that we have 6 vaccines entering phase 3 testing. Phase 3, of course, is the stage where we show that a vaccine is both safe and effective. And that's critical. We hope that in the next 4 months or so, we'll get a signal, an early signal from one of these vaccines that shows that it's actually protecting people against COVID-19 infection. And that will be a very, very important step. But equally important will be being able to manufacture it and then being able to distribute it around the world and to use it to prevent infections wherever they're occurring.
There are several things you mentioned. First of all, early sign of victory. Tell me exactly, what would you consider as early sign of victory?
So I think that the World Health Organization, the Chinese government, the US government have all picked a similar standard, which is 50% protection against infection. Now, we don't actually know that any of the candidates that are currently in clinical testing will do that. Although the data that they've shown so far in terms of protecting monkeys against infection have suggested that many, not only the candidates currently in phase 3, but others as well, may protect humans against infection. But we've been using the 50% cutoff is very important. Importantly, though, it's not just 50%. You can't just do it in 10 people and have 5 protected and 5 not. These are trials that have to be conducted in tens of thousands of people in order for governments, like the Chinese government or the World Health Organization, to be comfortable that the vaccine actually does what we say that it does, that the 50% protection is a robust number and is not going to be influenced by not having enough people in the clinical trial.
Then we come to another issue, which is about manufacturing. We have seen earlier discussion, you and I have been talking about this, there has to be a strategy and people need to agree upon it and implement it when it is the time. How can we understand what is the real picture now in terms of manufacturing?
So it's identified that in the world there is maybe the capacity to manufacture 10 billion doses a year. Now, all of that isn't going to be for COVID-19 because there are other very important vaccines that will need to continue to be made. CEPI has set as a target 2 billion doses by the end of 2021, and has also identified enough glass vials to put all that vaccine into, which is actually really critical when you think about how we get vaccines transported around the world. Other companies are saying that they can make hundreds of millions of doses, but again, these are discussions and sometimes these are deals that have just been formalized, and it's really going to be important to see that technology from one company can be effectively transferred to another company, and that second company can actually manufacture the vaccines at a quality sufficient to be able to be used around the world. We have to work together to do this. The thing that concerns me the most is that we aren't coordinated. That needs to go into ensuring that when we have the vaccine, that it isn't going to be a single deal between China and Brazil, or a single deal between a U.S. or European-based company and a country somewhere in the world. This has to be a solution that will be available to people all over the world. Big countries and small countries, rich countries and poor countries.
We have already seen some bad examples. For example, the U.S. stock storage of remdesivir, 80% of the global production. From a scientist's perspective, how to really avoid it when you see the reality is that the world is crippled by geopolitics? Is there some, plan B that we can think about?
I think that plan B is really to go to international organizations and use the power of countries working together. I mean, the Chinese government, European governments, other countries around the world can form a very forceful and formidable bloc to advocate strongly for fairness in the distribution of drugs and medicines for global health.
There are some new candidates on the scene that are not necessarily recognized by the WHO. For example, the Sputnik 5, the recent Russia's announcement of a fast-track vaccine, their own version, that has stirred quite a debate. Right after it, interestingly, you see U.S. President Donald Trump trying to order doses of vaccines that are not necessarily coming out of a trial 3 yet. How to fast-track the vaccine research and tests so that it will be on time to save life for COVID-19, which is already spreading around the world widely.
So that is a complicated question.
Yeah.
The United States is manufacturing vaccine so that when and if the vaccine is shown to be effective, it can be approved and licensed the correct way, but that they also then have the vaccine available when it's shown to be safe and effective. The problem with jumping the gun, with, for instance, claiming that you have a vaccine that's approved when in fact it hasn't been shown to be safe and effective, is dangerous. Because if that vaccine is used and people believe that they're protected and then increase their risk of, they engage in more risky behavior, then that's actually a bad thing. Also, if we don't know that the vaccine is safe and people are using a vaccine because the government has approved it, then again we set the government up and the companies up for a bit of a significant problem, because then people will be hurt because of potentially a false claim. So I think that the best thing to do is to wait until we actually have the data. Show the scientists the data, show the regulatory agencies the data, prove that the vaccine is safe and effective before you claim that it is and before you issue a license. I think that governments around the world are committed to the same standard of efficacy. The World Health Organization actually has an international standard as well, which it uses to license vaccines that are going to be used in global health, and that's called pre-qualification. So companies, actually Chinese companies or Indian companies or American and European companies that want to have vaccine purchased for global health, for the Global Alliance for Vaccines for Gavi, have to meet the pre-qualification standard.
There's the issue of trust here. That is crucial. However, there's also an issue of science literacy. We have seen, after the Sputnik 5 coming out, there's a lot of debate about trust. But before that, the debate already happened. In the United States, for example, a huge number of those being polled in various public polls have been suggesting they do not want to have vaccine. So that's only one of those examples in the world. So Dr. Kim, it's not about, it seems, whether the scientists are running around the clock, against the clock. It's not about many of the manufacturers are running around against the clock. It's not even whether the distributors are running against the clock. It's whether, to a certain extent, in some countries, whether people are going to accept a science-related product, which is called vaccine.
In fact, the surveys are suggesting that a significant number of Americans or Europeans, for that matter, might not take the vaccine. The problem is that we really don't know. The scientists don't have, the politicians, the public health figures, don't have the ability to say, here's the vaccine. I have it in my hand. We've shown that it's safe and effective. Things may change once we have that. So we have to wait for the data. And unfortunately, while we've been waiting to do things the right way, to develop the science, to develop the confidence in a vaccine, other people have been trying to undermine that confidence. And the way the news cycle and the publicity cycle and social media works, unfortunately, We don't have right now the proof that the vaccine works. And when we do, we will have a powerful weapon.
All right.
And we also have, I think, the same trust that people have that vaccines are safe and effective. And hopefully that is something that we can stand by.
Finally, before we go, we've seen only one country. I'm not just saying because we are broadcasting from Beijing in China, but only we are seeing one country, China, has claimed that once a successful vaccine comes out that are proved to be effective, it's going to be a global public good. When are we going to see, Dr. Kim, the other countries, the other manufacturers, researchers, teams going to come out and suggest that they're going to do the same? Only after the pledge they will implement. Without the pledge, it is far from becoming a reality.
So I think that pledge has been was a remarkable thing. But what China needs to do now is to step into the leadership void and really challenge the rest of the world. Put together the COVAX mechanism that will provide 20% of the necessary vaccines to all the countries in the world that have signed up for COVAX, and that's over 150. But the political will to do this has to come from leadership. So challenge the other the other advanced economies to step up and fund this mechanism. Put together the political will to make sure that at least 2 billion doses are available for the world by the end of 2021. That will be the challenge. And I think it's great that China stepped forward, and now it has a great position and an opportunity to lead and challenge the other countries to step forward also.
But if I could just have a footnote about that, their geopolitics has been making China-U.S. relations very interesting. When the research is going on about vaccine in China, the other side would claim without evidence that somebody is stealing their information about latest vaccine research. So all of the things make things much more complicated, and I do not want to trouble a scientist to solve this problem, but just put it as a footnote. Dr. Jeremy Kim, as always, a pleasure talking to you, Director General of the International Vaccine Institute. Thank you for your work and that of your team.
Thank you.
To follow our discussion about vaccine, we are joined in Providence, Dr. Megan Rani, Director of the Brown Lifespan Center for Digital Health, and in Beijing, joining us, Professor Ding Sheng, Dean of the School of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Tsinghua University. What a pleasure to see both of you. It's always a great conversation when I talk to scientists and medical workers. Thank you. So what about the latest research regarding vaccine? Earlier we talked to IVI Director General suggesting at the end of the year a successful vaccine going to come out. Do you have similar belief, Professor Ding from China?
Yes, I think we're still very hopeful one or several vaccine molecules, actually, drugs can come out actually towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Several of those actually are entering phase 3 studies.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Rani, your thoughts?
I'm quite hopeful that by the end of 2020, we will have vaccines that have made it through phase trials and are ready for production. But of course, between here and there is a long time. There could be things that go wrong. But the sheer number of vaccines that are entering phase 3 trials gives me hope that at least one will make it through and show itself to be both safe and effective in preventing COVID-19.
What we are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, right now are teams from China, the UK, the US, Germany have been showing their potential products are safe, but there's still a long way to go. According to WHO records, 165 vaccine candidates have started some forms of trials, and 26 of them in clinical trials. 6 candidates have entered phase 3 trials. The real test lies ahead in the final phase trials, experts say. What do you think are some of the most important qualities the vaccine needs to have in order to be so-called successful? Dr. Rani.
So the first and biggest thing is that safety, which you already alluded to. So by the time a vaccine has made it through phase 1 and phase 2, it's been shown to potentially have some signal of efficacy and to be safe for someone who's totally healthy. But we need to give it to tens of thousands of humans across the country or across the globe to show that it's safe. The next thing that we have to show is that it's effective, that it actually prevents infection with COVID-19. We would cause huge problems if we gave people a vaccine that caused problems, but we'll also cause large problems if we give people a vaccine, make them think that they're protected, and then they're actually not protected. So that's where that phase 3 trial is really important in showing that the vaccine does work to prevent people from coming down with COVID-19. And time will tell if any of these meet both of those criteria.
Of course, a lot of criteria, yet we are coming into winter, which means the seasonal flu will be on the horizon once again. So some talk about the possibility of combining COVID-19 vaccine with the seasonal flu vaccine together. How does that work?
I think the first thing is really we need to have a safe and effective coronavirus vaccine before actually we're really considering combining such one vaccine with a flu vaccine. Certainly, during the flu season, actually, having a flu vaccine actually that can really reduce the flu outbreak. That actually can also help the overall healthcare system.
Are we going to see some even faster than expected way of doing things? After all, there are vulnerable groups, for example, the elderly, the medical workers, and also teachers. So how shall we see, on the one hand, the huge concern about the safety of these groups, and also the huge now population of the world that have already caught COVID-19, vis-a-vis the safety and also the long-term issue about a vaccine?
So the first thing that we absolutely can't compromise on is safety. We could compromise a little bit on efficacy. So for those very high-risk populations like healthcare workers or nursing home residents, maybe it's okay to give them a vaccine that's only 50% effective, that only prevents COVID-19 half the time. That might be better than nothing for those of us that are being exposed to it constantly. For the average person, though, and I'll say the average American because I'm American here, but for the average person or American, we would likely want a vaccine that's better than 50%. That's certainly better than the average flu vaccine, because we don't want people, again, to be going out and thinking they're immune when they're not. We, of course, after rolling the vaccine out, are going to continue to need to study it to make sure there's no long-term effects, to see how long it's effective for. But I agree that there are some ways in which we can hurry things up, and we already are hurrying things up compared to usual vaccine development. But we cannot take risks with vaccine safety.
As both of you indicated, it is very important, the trust and the safety. That's probably the most important things about a vaccine. Having said that, though, testing. Professor Ding, China now, the latest number I checked, under 100, including the suspected cases. So how shall we see the testing that the Chinese vaccine researchers and makers are doing around the world, and how to make sure it is with one standard?
Certainly, that's a tough situation given actually in China, there's actually not much a new infection. Certainly doing trials actually need to be actually complied with actually the international, the general guidelines in terms of the trial design and also the enrollment.
Dr. Rani, in the United States, though, the number is huge. It's a place for testing, no problem, but how to do it and how to do it well, that's an issue.
As the other physician described, we have ample international and American rules around proper procedures for testing of vaccines. I expect that the tests for the vaccines that are currently in phase 3 will proceed no differently. They are all subject to institutional review board, ethics board regulations.
Another thing that we need to discuss is about, how should we understand the geopolitics involved in the overall process of researching, manufacturing, distribution, and the the recognition as to which vaccine is effective or not. Dr. Rani, as a scientist, how do you think we can avoid unnecessary trouble and bring people the best and the most effective vaccine?
To me, at the end of the day, the science is what speaks. And if we run trials, if we present our scientific findings in peer-reviewed journals that have international reputations, if we make sure that we meet all of the ethical safeguards, hopefully the science will take care of itself. Certainly, we're seeing a lot of cross-national collaboration already on vaccine development, and most of it is occurring according to the highest possible standards, although there are some reports, such as out of Russia, that are quite concerning. So my hope here would be that we can overcome geopolitics with good ethical science.
Similar question, but in a different way, Professor Ding, to you. How do you see this very interesting phenomenon? On the one hand, there seems to be a little bit secretive from one team to another around the world, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to claim that they are the champion.
There's certainly aspect of the perceived competition from actually those front runners in vaccine development. But in our scientific and biopharma community, actually, different vaccine developers are not really in sort of racing against each other. Overall, people are actually publishing early data overall in a timely manner, and also providing some useful information to the general public. As a scientist, I don't really see much competition in such way. Even in vaccine development, negative data or failed development, actually, such information could also be very useful for making the next one more successful, more efficacious and safe.
And finally, it's also not just in the research lab, it's also on the stock market, isn't it? Any company that are claiming having a clue to a possible successful vaccine, their stock market price is going up, just like skyrocketing. So once again, this fanfare vis-a-vis real research, how do you think, both of you as scientists and researchers, that we should well keep this balance?
I certainly think that companies that develop vaccines that are safe and effective and quickly developed deserve to have their stocks go up. That will help hopefully encourage them to invest more resources into the development and the production of vaccines. But if they create fanfare without having the data to back it up, well, eventually their stock prices are going to fall. So I'm not too worried about seeing stock prices rise, because again, if the science doesn't back it up, if those vaccines are shown to not be effective, well, the market will take care of that as well.
Right. And Professor Ding?
There are actually certain, perhaps called bad actors, using the market actually to benefit the company, perhaps in the short run. But as overall in the community, actually, there's actually very robustness in terms of developing the product, really actually being transparent about the data with actually really highest standard in terms of regulatory process. I think actually overall we're pretty confident we can do this right.
We hope that will be the case. Thank you so much for both of you, Dr. Rani and Professor Ding. Really appreciate it. We are looking forward to the successful vaccine. If possible, at the end of the year, that would be wonderful. Thank you.